Hey, good evening. My name is Dr. P. Dominique Padurano, and I am the president and founder of Crimson Coaching, which provides academic tutoring, test prep, and college counseling to students worldwide. This talk is called College Planning for 9th and 10th graders and the parents who love them. So just a little bit of background about me. I am a former high school teacher, and in 2014, I founded Crimson Coaching because I really wanted to work not just with social studies, which I used to teach, and not just with the students, but with families to try to make a more direct change in kids' lives. And sometimes people ask me, well, why did you name your company Crimson Coaching? And as you can see from the little mats on the photograph and diploma in back of me, they are Crimson, and they are from Harvard, which I got my undergraduate degree from. So Crimson Coaching, there you go. And I developed this talk because when I was a teacher in high schools, even very good high schools, often ignore 9th and 10th graders in the college planning process. Obviously, everybody knows about 12th graders. They're doing the applying. 11th graders, most people know this is the most important year for grades, and it's also the time when most kids take their SAT and ACT. But there's a lot of things that 9th and 10th graders can be doing to put themselves in the best position for those tests and applications as upperclassmen. And what I found was a lot of times parents and students just weren't getting that information from the high schools. And so that's why I decided to do that. So today's agenda, I'll be talking for about 30 to 40 minutes, and you could feel free to put your questions into the chat, but it's really difficult for me to toggle back and forth between the chat and the presentation. So I'll talk first, and then you can unmute yourself or just put your questions into the chat afterwards. And if you're listening to this as a recording later on, please feel free to email me questions at info@crimsoncoaching.com. But before I go any further, I would just like to thank you all for either tuning in live or later on for watching, and to Caitlin Moss, who's the young adult librarian at Central Islip Public Library, for inviting me, and to Central Islip Public Library for sponsoring this talk. So just to let you know sort of what my sources are, I am a historian by training. That's what my PhD is in. So I always like to give people my sources. So as a this is actually the place where I lived when I was an undergraduate at Harvard. It's called Dunster House. And when I went back for my 25th reunion a couple years ago, I sat in on a talk that William Fitzsimmons, who is the renowned head of undergraduate admissions at Harvard for about the last 25 years, and what he told us during that time. So some of that I'll be sharing with you tonight, some of those tips that Fitzsimmons shared with us. But the bulk of my information is going to come from the past 7 years of working directly with students applying to college, as well as the past 25 years of working with adolescents as a teacher. And of course, I keep abreast of the literature in this field as well. And Jeffrey Salingo's recent book, Who Gets In and Why, as well as Ron Lieber's recent book that was just published this year, The Price You Pay for College, all of their little tidbits are also finding their way into my talk. So I'll let you know when it comes from that. So just in terms of, well, what does the college planning process kind of deal with? On the one hand, of course, you want to build the strongest application that you possibly can. And we'll talk about what you could do as a 9th and 10th grader to do that. And then on the other hand, you want to find about 11 or 12 colleges that are right for you. And we'll also talk about how you can start that search as you get into high school. So the components of the college application will not seem all that new to people who went to college in the 80s or 90s like I did. You've got your grades, the coursework that you took, the harder the better, your standardized test scores, extracurricular activities, recommendations, college application essays. The new thing is this little bullet on the right there, and that's showing interest in a college. Today, we live in the era of big data, right? Everybody kind of knows this. Facebook collects our data, Google collects our data in order to target ads at us. Well, guess what? Colleges are collecting your kids' data too. So they know when your kid logs on to a website, their website. They know if your child opened up their email and how long between when that email was sent and when your child opened it. So all of these things, obviously, if you do all these things and answer the emails quickly, it shows or conveys interest in a college. And usually this is generally thought to be a really good thing. I do have an asterisk there, though, and that is because Lieber, in his book, The Price You Pay for College, points out that if you are hoping, and I think Salingo points this out too in his book, if you are hoping for merit aid or scholarship, it may be in your best interest not to appear too eager, not too in love with a college. It's sort of like, I hate to use this analogy, but it's really effective. It's a little bit like playing hard to get on the dating scene, right? If you play hard to get, you might convince the other person that they really want you more. Unfortunately, this is a little bit like that, okay? The more you show a college that you want them, the more they think you are willing to go there without any financial aid or scholarships from that college. So if you do need grants and scholarships from a university, you might want to think twice about showing too much interest. So in ninth grade, what can you do? My biggest tip is to establish the habits of a successful student when you are in the ninth grade. So what does that look like? Well, my big three are study skills, note-taking, and time management. These are all things, and the reason why I want to start is because I was doing this talk a few weeks ago, and I had an upcoming talk on time management. But if you're interested in my previous talks on any of these topics, you can go to my YouTube, which is at youtube.com/c/Crimson Coaching, and you can find a lot of my prior webinars there, and I believe I have them on all three of these topics as well. So you also want to start building healthy, smart relationships, both with friends. Choose your friends wisely in ninth grade. If you're hanging out with the wrong crowd, chances are more likely that you will go down the wrong path as well. And you want to start finding mentors, teachers, coaches, club advisors, administrators, people who you click with. These are people who will be invaluable in providing advice to you, not just throughout high school, but even beyond. I, for example, had a really wonderful relationship with my ninth grade social studies teacher. And back then there were junior highs, which were 7th to 9th grade. And luckily, she got moved up to the high school when we became 10th graders. She actually happened to get moved up as well. And so I was able to maintain a really nice relationship with her. And then when I decided to become a social studies teacher, when I was 26 years old, I contacted her, did my student teaching with her, and we're still in touch to this very day. So you just never know how that person can help you in your future. It's also a really good time to get in the habit of asking for help. And I will admit, this is something that I was not particularly good at. I don't think I'm particularly good at it even to this day, although I think I'm getting better. You want to think about, if you're really struggling with something, ask your teachers for help, ask counselors, ask your peers, ask tutors, through the National Honor Society. You don't even need to pay a high price tutor like me, but the more you can ask for help and get comfortable doing that, the better you are going to set yourself up for building the kinds of habits you need to be a successful college student, because nobody succeeds all on their own. Everybody needs a little help now and then. So I'm sorry, this is a prior talk, but I just mentioned where you could find my stuff on YouTube. So the following activities are things that you should start early, and then I recommend doing throughout all 4 years of high school. So even though this is called 9th and 10th grade college planning, I still think as a junior and senior, you should absolutely be reading quality nonfiction and be able to identify the main idea. This will help you on not only in your classes and perhaps in more difficult classes like AP classes, but also on the SAT and ACT. And if you're unsure about what quality nonfiction is or where you can find it, I'd like to recommend that you see my blog post. It's if you go to crimsoncoaching.com, which is my website, /blog-1, or just click on the tab that says blog, you'll see on the page something that says sort of how to become a better reader and writer. Read or something like that. And it basically in there, I have a whole list of free sources that you can read in order to help you get to be a better reader for the SAT, ACT when you're in 11th grade. When you're in 12th grade, you will have to supply really minute data on how many hours a week and weeks per year you did all of your extracurricular activities. And in 3 years, it's going to be really hard to remember what you did in 2021. So I recommend keeping an extracurricular journal. You don't even need to do it every day. Maybe do it once a week or even once a month of how many hours you spent doing each activity. I also recommend that you meet with your teachers regularly. Of course, if you are struggling with your extracurriculars, with your curriculum, then absolutely meet with those teachers for that, okay? Do extra algebra problems, figure out what is plaguing you in bio or how to write a good essay in global history. However, you don't just have to go to extra help. You could just show up at the teacher's classroom or office, wherever they happen to be before school or after school, and just get to know them. These people, again, can become your mentors, and they can also wind up writing great letters of recommendation for you when you hit 9th and 10th grade. When you hit 12th grade. And here again, choose your friends wisely. And also watch what you post on social media. I know that because you guys are digital natives, that you've been told since birth probably that your digital footprint follows you for the rest of your life. But I think it's also really hard when you're only 13 or 14 to really imagine that. You also want to think about not just social media, but even texts that you think are private are not always private. There is an infamous example about a young man who had been accepted to Harvard, and he said some off-color remarks in a text thread, And I think one of his friends went to Harvard and showed them that text thread, and they found out and they rescinded his offer of admissions. So, it can have really real life consequences, the things that you post either on the internet or even privately to friends in chat. So really be careful of that. So in 10th grade, you really want to start to demonstrate some passions of yours and to start challenging yourself. But before you do that, if you had a rocky 9th grade year in school, and many students do, because the transition between 8th grade and 9th grade socially is often a really difficult one. And also the academic expectations in 9th grade are often so much higher than they were in 8th grade that students struggle with that transition. So if you had poor 9th grade grades, the short story is, don't sweat it too much. But you really need to be careful that in 10th grade, you hit that ground running and your grades start going up. Because if your grades kind of stay the same, poor, or get even worse during 10th grade, the colleges will assume that that is your academic potential. And if you think your academic potential is greater than that, then now's the time that you might want to think about tutoring, either from a peer or from a professional like me. In 10th grade, you might want to think about taking an AP course in maybe one of your favorite subjects. AP courses will give you college credit, but even if you, don't score that high on the exam and aren't able to get that college credit, it still will show a college that you're applying to that you tried to challenge yourself. And if you do well in your school's grade for that course, that's going to help you in the admissions process. Once again, keep on cultivating those relationships with your academic teachers. And if you haven't gotten to know your guidance counselor in 9th grade, now's a great time to start, because he or she will also be writing a letter of recommendation for you in 12th grade. And finally, when you're at the end of the school year and choosing classes for the 11th grade, think about if you did well in 10th grade, especially if you did well in one AP course, think about adding an AP course or even a third. I would not recommend, though, going beyond 3 AP courses in any one grade in high school, no matter how brilliant you are. AP courses are very demanding, and you still want to have time for extracurriculars, for studying for the SAT or ACT, and just having fun and being a teenager, okay? Finally, especially if you were advanced in math in 8th grade and you have had 2 years of algebra and a year of geometry, think about prepping for the SAT or ACT in between 10th and 11th grades. The summer is a time when generally you have many fewer intellectual drains on you, okay? Even if you're working, usually that work is not, if you're a 10th grader, usually not that intellectually demanding. So when you get home, really try to devote yourself over that summer, the summer after 10th grade, to really preparing for the SAT or ACT. The ACT, I believe, offers in July and then September. So you probably won't have enough time to take the July one, but if you prep all summer, you will for the September one. The SAT offers June and August. So obviously June you won't be able to do, but certainly if you jump right on that right after school ends in June, you can definitely, if you're able to devote between 5 and 10 hours per week on SAT prep on your own, you can definitely take that last SAT in August. So another thing you want to think about is your extracurriculars, right? Ninth grade is going to offer so many new clubs and sports and activities that you never had available to you in middle school. So take advantage of that. And if you ever had the desire to try something new, ninth grade is the time to start that. By 10th grade, you want to start to narrow that focus down a little bit. If you did 17 things in ninth grade, maybe think about just doing 3 of them in 10th grade and really start to have less, 3 or 4 of them in less breadth, but in more depth. Maybe even think about a leadership role that you can occupy. And finally, don't spend so much time on your extracurriculars that your grades start to dip. Or if those extracurriculars are really important to you and your grades are dipping in advanced or honors or AP courses, if they're going beneath a B, which is like about the 80s, you might want to think about making sure that you drop down a level to the regular or Regents level so that you can get both a B or above, as well as do those extracurriculars. So, summers are a great time in addition to preparing for the SAT or ACT. They're also a really great time to do what college admissions people often call branding yourself, starting to say who you are. Okay. So if you are really like a math science kid, maybe look for a program over the summer that's dedicated to some STEM project or robotics or, something like that. Start to think about the person you want to present in 12th grade to colleges and work backwards and plan now. I know it's crazy because, especially with the weather we've been having the past few weeks, it seems like we're still in summer, but now's actually a great time to plan for the summer of 2022. Many programs already have their due dates by the time winter break happens, so before the new year. So start looking into those programs. If you need to earn money either for your family or just for yourself to save for college, that's totally okay. It's great if you can find something related to what you're interested in, but if you can't, that's fine too. And finally, if you're feeling really burnt out by school, and I know that especially during the pandemic, lots of kids while they were learning from home did, it's really totally fine to take a gap summer. And I think we need to remember that your mental and emotional well-being is really the most important thing, because without that, you won't be able to achieve anything. So if you need to spend the whole summer on the couch playing Minecraft, as long as that's okay with mom and dad, go ahead and do that. So up until this point, we've talked about the left side of that balance scale that I showed in the beginning, making sure that you can craft the best application that you can by taking those courses, finding those extracurriculars, maintaining relationships with teachers and things like that. But on the other side of the balance scale, it's finding those colleges, and you can start that right now. We live in a great part of the country that we have available to us: urban in New York City, suburban right where we are, and rural, not too far upstate and maybe even farther out east. Campuses. There are big and small campuses. There are public-private campuses. When you're in 9th grade and 10th grade, it's a great idea to visit a variety of different kinds of schools, really within a close driving distance, so that you just get a feel for, NYU is right for me. And maybe I don't want to stay in New York, but if I know that a a large urban university is something right for me, but I know I want to go to California, maybe I'll apply to UCLA. But if I know really that a small liberal arts college is really more what I'm looking for after visiting Vassar College, for example, maybe I'll apply to Santa Clara in California, right? So you can make, when you're in 11th and 12th grade, your college visits, if they're out of state, much more directed, because a kid who's going all the way to California to do college visits in 11th or 12th grade shouldn't be seeing both large University of California, Los Angeles, and small Santa Clara. Okay. Really, if they knew what kind of college they wanted to be at, they really should be at one or the other. Okay. So find lots of them close by, and by the end or by the end of 10th grade, figure out which one's right for you. While you're there, you may want to ask yourself, what might I like to major in? And maybe go to some courses, sit in on some classes in that major. Where might I learn this in the right way for me? Do I love the buzz of being in a large lecture hall with 300 other people? Or does that totally overwhelm me and make me feel like I'm just a number? And do I need to be in a small seminar with 15 other people? Am I okay with being taught by a graduate student, or do I need to be taught by a full professor? Go to a variety of different classes too while you're there at local schools, so that you can begin to figure the answer to these questions out. Okay. You'll note that the title for this one was Finding the Right Colleges for Me, and this next one is Funding the Right Colleges for me or you. Okay. Clearly, college is an expensive proposition, right? And money, how much something costs, will clearly factor into the decision you ultimately make. Jeffrey Salingo, who wrote the book called Who Gets In and Why, A Year Inside College Admissions, and who's also a journalist for the New York Times, has categorized the 5,300 or so colleges and universities in this country as either buyers or sellers. Sellers are much less numerous. They are the elite. Schools like the Ivy League, Stanford, MIT, Caltech, University of Chicago, they are the kinds of schools that are so selective that you have students across the country lining up who are willing to pay full price for that school. These schools typically do not offer merit aid or scholarships based on how good of a student you are. The aid they do offer is based on your parents' income as determined by the FAFSA. And by the way, if you are a 11th or 12th grader watching this, the FAFSA opened on October 1st and typically opens up October 1st every year. So make sure if you're applying for financial aid that you fill that FAFSA out really early, because at some schools, once the money is used up, it's used up. And if you get your application in soon, they'll know that you're online to get some of that money. So sellers offer need-based scholarships usually. So for example, I was very lucky to get into one of these seller schools called Harvard. And my parents did not make a ton of money, especially relative to the other folks who went to Harvard at that time. And so I got a lot of my education paid for by Harvard. Some of it, I did have to take out some loans. I did have a work-study job during school, and I did have to work in the summers. But a lot of it was paid for through grant money from Harvard. So, sometimes if you are a kid who did really well in high school, you can actually wind up paying less to get into, if you can get into a really good school, you can wind up paying less for that school than you would to go to a state school. Okay, so don't think that the Ivy League is out of reach for you just because your parents don't make a lot of money. The other probably 90% of schools in this nation, though, are not sellers, they are buyers. They need to attract you to go to their school, often by giving you merit aid or scholarships, or what Solingo and Lieber both refer to as coupons, right? So they are most likely to give a coupon off the full sticker price of tuition to a student that did really well than a student who didn't do really well. So when you are making out your college list, if you are a person, especially if you need financial aid, Solingo writes, if your family can't easily write $21,000 check for the average in-state public college, or $49,000 for the average private school, and do that for 4 years, be sure to have a few buyers on your list where your chances for merit aid are better. And you can check out which schools are buyers and sellers at Jeff Solingo's website right there. The other way that you might be more likely to get some buyers on your list and get some names, or some merit aid rather, is by looking beyond the brand names of schools where others in your high school have attended. And when you get into the 11th grade, typically at the end of 11th grade, beginning of 12th, your guidance counselor will sit you down. And if they're like many other high school guidance counselors, they'll use a program called Naviance, which will compare your grades, SAT scores, if there still are SATs by that point, as well as a whole bunch of other statistics about you, and compare them to the students in the year before you and the year before that who got into various colleges around the country and the state. And what winds up happening is that'll send you a list of only schools that kids in the class before you applied to. But what happens if you go back and back and back and back and back and back, kids apply to the same schools every year. And so they're going to get used to, for instance, from Central Isa Public High School, a bunch of kids applying to, say, SUNY Binghamton. Okay. But you really want to look outside that little box, because if they never heard, for instance, if Case Western University which is a great school in Ohio, never had a Central ISO graduate, they might be more inclined to offer you some money. So I put, this is really like an 11th grade thing, but I put it because really you might want to think about doing it in the summer after 10th grade. Try to finalize the first draft list that you have of the colleges on your list by the start of 11th grade. And I give talks on how to craft a college list and applying for college one step at a time that takes you season by season what you should do in 11th and 12th grade. And you can, for those dates of those upcoming talks, you can visit my website, crimsonccoaching.com/upcoming-classes-workshops. And it'll give you all of those upcoming talks that I'm giving in November. I don't think I'm crafting a college list anytime soon, but if you go to my YouTube, I do think I have a prior webinar on that topic there. And while you're there, if you could thank me by subscribing to my YouTube channel, that would be great. It just helps other folks to find me on YouTube. Finally, Again, because some of this needs to be planned technically, maybe while you're still in 10th grade or the summer after, start to visit the safety and target schools on your list in person in the beginning of 11th grade. Okay. Hopefully by the time you guys are in 11th and 12th grade, the pandemic restrictions on campuses will be all over. Even now, they're quite a bit better than they were 1 year ago. 1 year ago, you really couldn't even walk on a campus. Now you can walk on a campus. You're generally confined to outdoors, though. So you're not really able often to see the dorms or the classrooms or the dining halls. But I have a feeling by the time you guys get into 11th grade, that's going to be different. So you really want to start whittling down your list to 3 reaches, 5 targets, and 4 safety schools by the start of your senior year. So, try to really, most students have, 27 dream schools they want to go to. Okay. Try to visit your safety and targets, because most anybody even would go to their dream school without even visiting it. Okay. But you really need to know which safety and target schools you would say yes to, if that's really what you're choosing from when the decisions come out. So I would start at visits at the bottom of my list and work upwards. So just some final thoughts. I know this can seem really overwhelming, but with planning, the journey to college can be exciting, fun, and filled with meaningful experiences, not just for the family, but also for teens themselves when they learn really more about themselves and the kinds of adults that they want to become. So to learn more, feel free to email me at info@crimsoncoaching.com if you would like a little cheat sheet or a handout. Usually when I give these talks in person, I of course do, the teacher in me gives little handouts, but since I'm at home, I can email you a PDF with college planning tips for 9th and 10th graders. If you like Crimson Coaching on Facebook, you can get news of my upcoming talks, because I usually do little promos and you'll get notified when I do one of those little promo videos on Facebook Live. You can also go to my website to sign up for my newsletter. And of course, I send my newsletter just once a month, and I always, let my readers know what talks I'm giving. And then finally, again, subscribe to Crimson Coaching on YouTube for short little tips, as well as longer webinars like this. So that is really all I have for today. I want to thank you for coming, and Central Islip Public Library for hosting me. And I think right now I'm just going to ask if the one participant who's in the audience has any questions. Sharing with you a great question. Safety school is a school that you're almost certain you will get into based on your grades, the median SAT score at that school, and what your own SAT score is, and the acceptance rate at that school. So what percentage of kids applied last year, and did they accept? So school like University of Arizona, that's a big public university, accepts about 85% of the students who apply. School like Harvard accepts 3.5% of the students who apply. So for most kids, University of Arizona would be a safety, but Harvard would be a reach. Okay. Targets are right in the middle, right? It's kind of like Goldilocks with the beds, too hard, too soft, just right. So targets are where, based on those same criteria, acceptance rate, maybe about 50%, SAT score and grades do you think you're likely to get in? And, again, obviously, this is a science. This is not a science, it's an art, right? I say about 50%, but clearly if you're a kid who had like, a 2.0 GPA and 1,000 on your SAT, a school, even with a 50% acceptance rate, could be a reach for you. On the other hand, if you're a kid who got a 1,500 on your SAT and has a straight A average, 50% acceptance rate is probably a safety for you. So all of this is relative, but that's like a general rule of thumb. So scholarships really vary. The question was, when should a 10th grader start applying for scholarships? And full disclosure, I am not a scholarship or financial aid expert. There are people in the college consulting world who do just that, okay? And if you email me on Helic, I'd be happy to provide you with their names after. You could absolutely, as a 10th grader, start looking around for scholarships now. You will find a wide variety of different scholarships. Some you can apply for at the end of 10th grade. Some you can apply for at the end of 11th grade. Some you can only apply for in 12th grade. So it's really never too early to start. All right. Well, once again, I just want to thank you for showing up. It has been my pleasure in speaking to you. I hope you found it helpful. And if you think of any questions after we finish this talk, do feel free to email me at info@crimsoncoaching.com. I'm the kind of person who I will be thinking about something I heard like the next day in the shower, and I'll be like, oh, why didn't I ask this person that question? So feel free to email me if you think of something tomorrow or the day after, okay? Thank you so much. Have a great night.